Good afternoon. Welcome back. It is Sunday, November 19th, as we bust into the last week and a half of the month, as we start getting closer and closer to the final month of birthdays and events on the channel. So, we've got a few birthdays to talk about. We'll get to those in just a second. We're going to talk about a few events, and we'll start in 1988 in the ARCA race at Atlanta International Raceway, now known as Atlanta Motor Speedway. Mickey Gibbs won that race. Could it have been a surprise? Maybe. But in all honesty, in the ARCA division at that time, there were really not any surprise winners because the series was such a great series back in the day where a lot of guys would actually come down from Cup and run, but it wasn't like the Xfinity series where it was the top guys. This was more the guys that were running 25th to 35th every week, and they just wanted to get more track time because the ARCA cars were essentially older Cup cars, and some of these teams were running older Cup cars. But Mickey was kind of in the early stages of his NASCAR career. I don't think he had made his first Cup start yet. Yeah, no, he had. He had run a few races earlier in 1988, and he was kind of wanting to get into Cup full time, and ARCA was a way that a lot of drivers in that day could prove, hey, I belong. Well, in this race, there was a horrible crash involving Don Marmer. Many of you maybe have never heard that name, but it's a widely covered wreck where he hit the end of the pit wall trying to avoid a crash. And the end of the pit wall had a couple of large tractor tires, and he hit it head on, overturned a couple of times. Dr. Jerry Punch was working with ESPN that day, and it's well covered on a couple of podcasts. So just hunt those podcasts up. I think maybe Dr. Punch talks about it on one of his podcasts. I believe it was really covered in depth on Dinner with Racers about 4 or 5 years ago. But there's a lot of detail that Jerry goes into about the different medical procedures he had to do in the car to save Don, and some little fibs he had to tell to the helicopter team to get him to the hospital to save this man. And I believe Don is still alive today and lives somewhere in Chicago, Illinois suburbs or thereabouts. But anyway, go to 1989 on this day. Dale Earnhardt wins the Cup race in Atlanta. And again, another Atlanta race marred by tragedy. I'm going to give you a fact here in just a second. But Dale wins the race. Rusty wins the title, his first and only Cup Series title. And sadly, ARCA veteran and part-time Cup driver Grant Adcox was killed in this race. I don't know if it was a part failure or if a tire blew or what happened, but a lot of times cars would hit the wall with the right front very hard, and that's what happened here. And rumors suggest that maybe an improperly mounted seat belts led to injuries that Grant sustained in the crash. Now, I'm going to talk about 3 Atlanta races, all involving Dale Earnhardt. This one, 1984, that was Dale's first, it was his second win at Atlanta, but his first since 1980. But in this particular race in 1984, of course, we talked about a few days ago, Terry Schoonover died. Then 1 year after this 1989 race we initially spoke of in 1990, Dale wins the title. He doesn't win the race, but he wins the title. The first time he wins the title at Atlanta. Because previously he had already clinched pretty much going in. I guess 86 he did, but this being the season finale. So this speaks of the races being season finales and or whatever. But 3 races that had Dale Earnhardt significant actions. A person was killed because 1990, of course, Mike Rich was killed in that pit road crash. So I just thought that there was an eerie tie-in with the fall Atlanta race and Earnhardt winning there. So 2016 at Homestead, Miami, Daniel Suarez wins the race and wraps up his first and only Xfinity Series championship. Of course, he would move to Cup the following season, replacing Carl Edwards, who abruptly retired. And in 2017, in the Cup Series race at Homestead, Martin Truex Jr. wins the race and to date wins his only series title. And that was really it was a really cool win to watch because Furniture Row, if you go back and you watch all the teams that have really won Cup Series titles in the last 10 or 12 years, Penske's won 3 titles since 2012. And when they started back in 1991, yes, I know that they ran in the 70s and a few races in the early 80s, but they're planted their roots in NASCAR in 1991. They came in as a powerhouse team. Who else do we have? Stewart-Haas. They had somewhat humble beginnings if you consider when Gene Haas was sole owner. But as Stewart-Haas, they've been a powerhouse team. And even Hendrick, yeah, they came in with that really wobbly foundation in 1984, but it didn't take them but maybe 2 years to start growing into that multi-car powerhouse team that they've become today. Furniture Row, yeah, in 2017, 2016, thereabouts, they did run 2 cars, one with Eric Jones, but it was just to get Eric Jones up to speed in the Cup Series because he was going to move over to JGR very soon. But Furniture Row was primarily a 1-car team. Yeah, they had affiliations with different, JGR, Hendrick or Gibbs, or Hendrick or RCR, whoever, when they were with Chevy. But they never had a big solid foundation, and they were based out of Colorado. So I think this was a big deal, that maybe sent some minor trimmers through NASCAR's like, hey, we don't have to be based directly in Charlotte to be successful. It helps, but I think, maybe it made some teams think, what if we were based here? What if we were based there? So anyway, let's continue. That is our event. 6 minutes in, haven't even shown my hands or a card on the screen. We'll start with a birthday that I thought I had a card of and didn't. Born on this day in 1954. Ran in the IndyCar Series kart and the USAC versions for many, many years. Competed in several Indy 500s, but his best finish was 10th in 1979. That would be Mr. Spike Gehlhausen. And I wanted to include him just because Spike is a cool name. Today in IndyCar we have Stingray Robb. So back in the 70s and 80s, we had a Spike. So very cool that he got a 10th place finish in what was a fairly competitive era of IndyCar. Now this card of this racer, I didn't think I'd have a card of this guy. Born on this day in 1971, motocross legend, Jeremy McGrath. Now on the back of this card is a different rider, so I'm not going to show that. But I thought I was going through some cards, and I was like, whoa, I actually have a Jeremy McGrath card that I can show. We'll go to next birthday, born on this day in 1942. He's a crew chief in the 80s and 90s, early 90s. He was a car owner in the mid-80s as he took over the former J.D. Stacy car. Of course, J.D. ran a car. J.D. Stacy owned cars up until 1983. This man took over his shop in 1984, ran a handful of races in 84, 86, and then just kind of went on to being a crew chief, and that would be Mr. Robert Harrington. This is the only card, so you're looking at the complete line of Robert Harrington collection here. He has one card, 1991 Pro Set. There's a little information about Mr. Harrington, and it looks like he was on the Jasper team or the Cornflakes team. Not really sure who, but Yellow Hat, he's probably with the Larry Pearson's team at that time, I think. Really can't remember. Then our final birthday, he's been in NASCAR as an owner in 2 different eras, really. That late 70s, mid to late 70s big car era, and the late 80s, early 90s in the transition into the corporate era. I got 2 of his 4 cards here. But he is a championship-winning car owner, despite not being in the sport for a long time. And he's had drivers like Hut Strickland, Jimmy Spencer, Dave Marcus, and of course, Dale Earnhardt. That'd be Mr. Rod Osterlund. So we have his rookie card, an 89 Max, and then his 90 Max there. You see the 57 card behind it. We'll turn this one over and it'll show you his stats. And you can see, I'm not sure why okay, so you see an 81 was his last year, then he came back in 89. Of course, 1980 was his championship year. And then we'll look at the 89 back here, and it'll talk about, how he returned to the Cup Series after the absence, and he was involved in some real estate developments out in California. But I thought that was super cool, and there's actually, kind of a tie between these 2 guys, because Rod sold his team in 1981 to J.D. Stacy. Who ended up taking over? Who did we speak of earlier? It took over J.D. Stacy's team? Robert Harrington. So there's the two car that ran in 1986 with Rodney Combs and 1984 with Elliott Forbes Robinson was still basically this car, this team that Rod Osterlund had ran with Dale Earnhardt and Joe Ruttman in 1982. Or 81, I'm sorry. But anyway, kind of a cool little tie-in with our two birthdays just now popped into my head. But anyway, thanks again for watching. As always, really, really do appreciate it. Hope you guys enjoy the rest of your Sunday. And we will see you tomorrow. Thanks for watching.